while we're at this juncture, is there anything that we did wrong as a congregation in terms of how we handled COVID?
I certainly have some thoughts on that, and anybody who's listening to this, they may have their views on this as well. There were a lot of answers, a lot of ways we could have gone forward. And the congregation, I would say, if we're kind of pulling the curtain back, I would let them know that I'm really proud of our session, actually, in the way that
I am too.
We handled COVID.
I think they called it perfect.
Yeah, and the reason that I'm proud of them is that there was only the 12 of us, 13 of us in that room, or 15 of us at the time, will know the effort that was taken to come to consensus. Like society, there was a strata of views when it came to what is COVID, what is its actual threat, what should our response be, and all of those, and there was a lot of ignorance early on too. We didn't know what we didn't know. The amount of effort and prayer and consideration and time, some of those meetings they were hours and hours long, and Zoom meetings midweek.
Yeah.
We were having several additional session meetings, not just the stated meeting that we have once a month. The amount of effort that was taken by our session to wrestle with these questions and to try to get it right, because they understood the gravity of the situation. They understood the weight of it all. They understood the weight in terms of the public health dimension, but they also understood the weight of it in terms of fidelity to being the church.
The spiritual dimension.
Yeah, the spiritual dimensions of it all. And
right.
Balancing those things took a lot of effort.
Yep.
And so I'm really, really proud of our session and the way that they handled that.
And by and large, Nate, I agree with you. They got pretty much everything right. But was there anything that we did wrong?
If I think of it in terms of those 18 months, shut down and till the vaccine got up and out. Right. Two things that I would try to avoid. Well, the one is communication oriented. I think we did a lot of communicating.
So it's my fault.
It's not your fault. There's the data.
I'm okay with that, by the way.
There's the data, and then there's all the soft parts of communication. Yeah. And I think that there's a couple things I could have communicated better. I definitely leaned toward the stand tall approach to providing leadership with COVID. And I did that because, as I heard Eugene Peterson say once, and I can't remember who he was quoting, Oscar Wilde or somebody, when you have to build a chicken coop in a tornado, you grab whatever piece of lumber is flying by your head and you nail it down because you just are trying to secure things.
Right.
And we were building a chicken coop in a tornado. There was a certain amount of stability and strength that I was wanting to communicate, to say, we're standing tall here, we're stable here, we're not cratering here. But that can also unintentionally communicate a stiltedness or a woodenness or a hardness that is not part of the pastoral heart. At the end of the day, I am a pastor. I believe that's my identity and calling, and I do have those sensibilities, I think, pretty strongly, but I may not have communicated them as much as I could have because I was trying to hold us all together. And so I think what became the predominant note in terms of my communicating is we're going to be fine, we're steadfast,
right.
We're immovable,
right.
But that could also communicate something else that you don't want to communicate. I also would have tried to communicate.
What is that? Obstinance?
I don't hear you.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't care.
Right.
Those were never the case, but we were in the fog of war, and it was live ammunition. It wasn't a drill.
Yeah.
And so
good metaphors, good analogies.
Yeah. I'm not saying any of that as an excuse. I'm saying that as a regret. I think if I had a do-over, I would have been more mindful of trying to communicate some of the softer dimensions of that leadership, as well as the need for some of the harder side of it.
I think too, if we're going to talk about what did we not get right with COVID, there's enough blame, if you will, to go around.
Sure.
Because we went through COVID. I guess my hope for these kinds of conversations is that we'd be able to communicate what's in the heart of the pastor that doesn't always come across, again, while you're building the chicken coop in a tornado. I reflect on my own experiences at Beverly Heights.
You had a couple chicken coops in a tornado.
Well,
I can think of two that come
Right,
immediately to mind.
And other situations that come to mind as well, that because of the nature of the pastoral office, nobody knows about.
Yeah, sure.
Being in the office, quiet, still, calling out to the Lord, Lord, I'm not sufficient
Right.
for these things, really concerned. And then having to walk out of my study door to a congregation that was waiting, almost with bated breath. What are we going to do now? What happens now?
Yeah.
In the face of that immediate need to provide leadership, perhaps the pastoral concern that is real in the pastor, is not italicized as much as the leadership thing. So the whole matter of hand-holding, which is an important part of the pastoral ministry, and taking people by the hand and saying, "Come along with me." That's a challenge, and you win some and you lose some, and that's the nature. That's the nature of the pastorate.
I would say that, Rick, you benefited in that our two chicken coop moments, if we want to call it that, to me were very, very clear what had to be done. And the two I'm thinking of course, are Pastor Tim's departure,
Right.
and then the second, the
Denominational
issue. To me, there was great clarity in what had to happen. I think COVID is a little different because clarity was one of the earliest things that was lacking.
Yeah.
But you said there was a second reason, Nate. So you said there were two.
Yeah.
And I loved your first. What's the second?
As we alluded to earlier, I'm more of a hard charger as opposed to an incrementalist. I feel the urgency very acutely.
Yeah.
The clock is always, it's kind of like, well, if you want to be a good quarterback, you've got to have that internal clock.
Yeah.
But I feel that clock.
Yeah, and you get charged up by that, and you make good decisions in that. I mean, I will never forget. I get back March 18th, 2020, from Uganda. I think the very next day, you were talking to me about writing observations. You came up with the title. It was a very, very smart idea. And I'm not saying because I've done it well, I don't think I have particularly. I'm saying that people would want the kind of information that I could ostensibly provide.
Right.
And that was you. So in that moment of the tornado, reaching up for boards, you have a skill for that.
Yeah. Well, where I made my misstep upon reflection was in grabbing the boards, because I love the church and I want the church to be in full operation. I moved more quickly on programming than I probably should have. And I can give you the perfect example on all this was, I think we made all the right decisions about worship. But when it came to our return to confirmation last year, that didn't absolutely have to happen in January.
Yeah, right.
But I wanted it to happen.
Right.
I wanted us to move towards a return to the full flowering of our ministry.
Right.
And because of that, there was a couple of us that got COVID, and
Well, you and me both.
yeah, you got it.
Right.
I got it. Beth got it, and a couple of the kids got it. So that didn't have to happen.
Yeah.
I didn't have to move that fast. That's where incrementalism would have helped me.
And the irony is that to this day, I'm not aware of a single COVID case that emanated from worship within Beverly Heights.
I think that there is the tendency on the part of people in the congregation to think that when Nate and with him the staff and the session decide, for instance, to reinstitute the confirmation class, which on reflection may have been too soon or too quick or that kind of thing. But it's a lack of love on the part of the congregation, on the part of some.
Yeah.
Because the assumption is that if Nate or the session were really following the lead of the Holy Spirit, they would agree with me and not have moved so quickly. That's why I like these conversations. It opens the door,
Yep.
for the congregation to hear, well, you know what? It's not quite that easy. It's not quite that simple.